Jump off that exhausting hamster wheel and into balanced living with Dr. Marissa.
Promise you joy in the mystery.
Dr. Marissa, also known as the Asian Oprah. Her mission, to be a beneficial presence on the planet. Her purpose, to be your personal advocate to live, laugh, love, learn. Her life motto, don't die wondering. Take back your life with Dr. Marissa Pay.
And welcome. You are tuned into Take My Advice, I'm Not Using It, Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on KCAA, CNBC News, NBC News, and NBC Sports Station, AM 1050, FM 102.3, FM 106.5, and streaming everywhere. iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, iTunes, and more. Because I want the maximum amount of splatter zone the airwaves can go to fulfill my Happy 88 mission, 88 million more happy people in the next 8 years. So I am glad that you're here. I'm continuing my Happy New Year greetings as we move into this new year full of uncertainty. As usual, we thought it would be gone last year. We thought it would be gone the year before. But it looks like we still are learning how to be flexible, adaptive, tolerant. I don't say patience because the last time I asked for patience, I got teenagers. So we're not adding that to the list. But the reason why I say that is you have a plethora of places that you can go to right now to get bad news, to get the latest statistics on how many are sick, to get the latest statistics of who's dying and the latest statistics of the variant and how many people who were against the vaccine who are now dead. I hope you are paying attention to that because it is my belief, and my beliefs are based on scientific inquiry, scientific data and studies and empirical science and medical science that we trusted seemingly a lot before all this came down and got mixed up with politics, that I still do believe that you have a better chance of staying healthy. So please go get vaccinated and boosted and wear masks, social distance, and do everything that you know is good for you. Taking walks. Station owner got sent some Tahibo tea, and I've been drinking that. Not the best tasting stuff, but it's supposed to be good for my health. I take zinc. So I'm doing what I can. My number one suggestion, though, is to meditate. And there's a lot of studies that show that when you do meditate and you quiet your mind, you give your body the best chance of regenerating and becoming very healthy and protected against the virus. So that's my New Year's, please, a kind, loving admonition to all of my listeners to make sure that you are doing everything you can, because I really do hope this is the last year that we have mandates and prescriptions and reactions, and we can move to a beautiful space where we understand that we've learned something through this experience and never take for granted things that we might have before, certainly getting together with friends, eating out, and many more things. But we also have hashtag COVID silver lining. And I wanted to take a minute just to point out that some things we learned we could not have learned if we had not had this pandemic. And so one of them is the importance of connecting with people, and that we don't have to drive 2 hours to go to work. Yes, we've had our adjustments. Yes, it's not been easy to look remotely good on Zoom. I actually have an article on that published in Medium, how to look remotely good. And for those of you who think this was just a temporary thing, the good news is I think people are understanding that they don't have to drive 2 hours to go to work. We don't have to spend Monday through Thursday at airports all the time to get to meetings, but we can have meaningful contact, meaningful connection through remote devices like Zoom or StreamYard or any of the things that have been developed or enhanced because of our COVID adaptability or innovation. I also love the fact that many people have better relationships. Yes, there was a little time where there was an adjustment and maybe it got worse before it got better. But I've heard over and over how much better our relationships are, both with significant others, as well as our kids, because we do have time. We got to slow down. We got to have that pause. We also saved money. I saved money on clothes, manicures, pedicures, reflexology, makeup, the bottoms of my wardrobe. So all of those things are hashtag COVID silver lining. And I hope that you are also using this time before we quote unquote go back to normal. You've had thoughts about becoming an entrepreneur, if you've had thoughts about getting into a different line of work. I've been a cheerleader for one of the BS belief systems that I think has hurt us as humankind, which is this American dream where, you go to good school, you go to get a job, you're forced into maybe something that you're good at, but you don't really like. And so if nothing else, I hope during the pandemic, you had time and followed through on some of your interests. Some people learned languages, realized they'd like to work abroad. Some people took up an instrument they've always wanted to take up and decided that, they could do weekend garage band kind of gigs while they are doing their real job or their daytime job. So hopefully this pandemic has been a point of expansion. I hope that you know that you are more than just your job, just over broke or working for someone else's dreams, that you can expand yourself, that you can pick up something new, that anybody that tells you you're here on earth just to have one career, one thing that you worked so hard at, and before hashtag BC19, as I like to affectionately call the time before COVID, I work as an organizational psychologist, and I can tell you for a fact that most of my clients hated their jobs, but they stayed for their paycheck. And one of the beautiful things about this pandemic is they had time, still getting paid, to really look at, am I happy? Do I like what I do? Do I love what I do? And is there a way to either adjust the way I'm thinking about what I'm doing so that I like it more and stay on the side of gratitude, which was yesterday's tip on the 21-day fast from complaining with Dr. Marissa? Or is it time to love what I do and be open to doing something else? So if you missed my show yesterday with my entrepreneurial coach, he is Dennis Kataudis, and he gave us a lot to think about around social media, that it is just as important to be good at what you do as to be able to communicate and put yourself out there on what you do. Kind of like my workshops and be the best and you can broadcast it. But his expertise in LinkedIn, in a lot of the recruitment, even if you're someone who wants maybe the same kind of job, or right now it is the employees market. So hopefully you are seeing abundance in your choices, because that's always connected to happiness. And that's my gig. All right. So there's your little what's up, doc, what's going on, and how you can be happier even as we go into a new year. Still, it's not dark. The light at the end of the tunnel is not that of an oncoming train, but it is still real enough that we want to take care of ourselves, want to put our best foot forward, and self-care. That's the theme for this new year for me, for you. All right. And it is January the 5th, So, what day is it according to nationalday.com? For the deliciousness of life, it is National Whipped Cream Day. So you have my permission to have wonderful whipped cream, however you like it, on whomever you like it. Just kidding. That was my middle name for some people is DE, double entendre, and I get in trouble all the time. As well, it is National Bird Day. And those of us who were so busy doing this, doing that, doing this before the pandemic and getting into do have had, 20 months now of time to check out the birds. And I'll tell you, one of my favorite things in life is to see birds fly in formation. These are a few of my favorite things. Sorry. I absolutely love watching birds because they are kind of like dogs in the sense that they're happy just because. So celebrate National Birds Day with me by being happy just because you're alive. Okay. All right. And I mentioned before, it is the 21-day fast from complaining with Dr. Marissa. It is full on. We have almost 500 people participating. And if you haven't registered yet, go to drmarissa.life and go in. Well, the Asian Oprah giveaway is one registration, which is worth $21 to my nonprofit. And I will pay my nonprofit so you can be officially registered in the fast. Just go to drmarissa.life and put 21-day fast. And if you do 21 consecutive days from today, doesn't have to be by the 21st of January. That means just every day you cannot complain. And if you do, you have to start over at day 1. There's also a Facebook group that you can join, and I post there every day with the daily tip. And because I'm here with you, I will give you the daily tip for day 5 on the 21-day fast from complaining, which is something that I learned from Dr. Phil. Balance tip day 5 on the 21-day fast from complaining with Dr. Marissa, also known as the Asian female Dr. Phil. If the grass looks greener on the other side, water your own lawn. When I hear myself complain with envy, I have a choice to be green with envy or make a choice to change my own landscape by watering my own lawn. So there's your tip. Don't be green. Be grateful. That's the tip from day 3 for everything you have, and then you will be less likely to complain. And last but not least, today is National Screenwriters Day. So I thought I would spotlight one of my favorite screenwriters. She's more than that, director, producer, has won plenty of awards, but her best title is she's one of my BFFs, and her name is Piper Dellums. And she came on the show to honor her father, Ron Dellums. I had been invited and went to the amazing service to honor him in Oakland. That's when Stevie Wonder recognized me when he heard me say hello, and he was there to perform, as well as Nancy Pelosi was there to speak, big actors and musicians and all those to honor her father, Ron Dellums. If you think that you recognize the name, you probably do, because he was instrumental in having Nelson Mandela freed from prison. So the spotlight interview when we come back is Piper Dellums. So don't go away. Come back and enjoy National Screenwriters Day, highlighting Piper Dellums and Ron Dellums. Here on Take My Advice, I'm Not Using It, Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on KCAA, the station that leaves no listener behind.
back your life with Dr. Marissa Pay.
And we're back. You're tuned in to Take My Advice. I'm Not Using It, Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on NBC News, CNBC News, and NBC Sports radio station KCAA, AM 1050, FM 102.3, FM 106.5, and streaming everywhere, including my YouTube channel, where you can get all of my past 609 shows, but who's counting? As well as my red carpet playlist with some great people, including Halle Berry, John Travolta, Quincy Jones, and much more. Those are just the ones that are easiest for me to name drop first, as well as my new short film, PPP, the new post-pandemic possibilities, which a lot of my rose-colored Kool-Aid went into, just in case you're wondering what that's about. As well, you will get these kinds of interviews that I'm spotlighting today. It's Piper Dellums to celebrate National Screenwriters Day. Take it away, Piper. Enjoy.
Hear your applause and your accolade around it shows us that we need one another, that we really are that village, that we're under that red tent as women. And although we bleed out together. It is called unclean outside, but within it is the cleansing, purifying the catheter of the soul. It is so extraordinary. So just rehearing that, I remembered how her voice reached out like eagle's wings, and I mean, it soared over us and it fed us. It fed us, and it was stunning. So thank you for replaying that, because I was sort of having an out-of-body experience when it was happening. So to be able to be rooted and to see it and to relive that, that expanded me, just like your beauty is right now.
Oh, I love your
You're so beautiful.
Sorry,
we're
Ryan.
having
It's
girl
gonna
crushes.
be we're gonna. Well, and let's put the moose on the table. That's my Canadian version of elephant in the room. So it is time. I don't know what it is, and I think it is changing.
Sure.
But amongst powerful women, there seems to be that hiccup or the dynamic or that stutter. Where we're in MSU University, we make shiitake up about, they're not for me, they're against me, or, we don't support each other the way we could. And I guess if nothing else, what this whole experience has taught me is, I just have to do this. That's all I got to do. I just got to stop doing this. Right. And just do this. And when I do this, you appear. Well,
I love that.
Tara appears. I met her through Lisa Cohen. Like we're on the planet. It's time, but we have to open for it.
Yes. Very true. Very true.
Like what you're saying is we don't need to push or slam our way in.
That's right.
We open up into, that was like, I don't know where that came from.
Absolutely. Well, you're talking about an open heart, an open vessel. And here's the reality. Even before we're able to open up and receive one another, open up and support one another, we have to be honest with the fact that we as women have had a dialogue of suppression spoken into us. So we have a tendency, even in the privacy of our own homes, encapsulated in the four walls of our own homes, to have private tears, to have private woes, to have broken relationships, to not know if we're mothering to the highest potential. We have a tendency to take everything in. We're vessels of enclosure. So we absorb. When our children are in tears, if they're suffering, if they're addicted, if they're not soaring, then we take that responsibility in ourselves, and our own thoughts become our own cancer. And then we can step out into the world and still be the Winnie Mandelas and the Hillary Clintons in the world, but have our own private pain, our own private struggle. And so until we allow ourselves to be transparent enough, to honor our pain, to honor our fragility, to honor our humanity, to recognize that the cosmetic that we put on the outside is never going to be enough to beautify our human condition, because we need the thorn in our side. Without the thorn in our side, we're not going to be dropped to our knees. Everyone needs something to drop them to their knees so that we're in a position of prayer. The beautiful thing about Take Up the Cross and Follow Me is this reminder reminder that the cross is a bloody place. The cross is wherever we bleed, and women bleed. We bleed every month. We bleed in childbirth. We bleed out in trauma and abuse and rape and suffering. We bleed out when we lose our rights. We bleed out when men that we've given everything to, or women that we've given everything to, shows us that they are not who we thought that they were. We bleed out. But if we allow ourselves to bleed one to another, then we can allow ourselves to have our hearts flow. Because the word pure, the purity of the heart, the word pure comes from the same word that catheter comes from. Catheter means to flush. We need to flush our hearts. Yes, we need to guard them, but we need to keep them open. Otherwise, we're imprisoned. And if we can come out of our own prisons, then we can open up the prison gates for our sisters. But we need to come out of our own prisons first. And we are prisoners in our homes. We are prisoners in our relationships. We are prisoners as parents, because expectation becomes the thing that we rely on. If we stopped having expectation and just realize that all of it is grace, mercy, human fragility, that all of us are broken and that our brokenness is still beautiful. It's like this glass bird feeder that I have in my garden that I loved so much, that I used to believe was like a reflection of me. It was clear and crystal and had all these flowers on it. And I was like, wow, this is the reflection of the Eden that I want to live in, that I want to create with my thought, I want to sow into. And one day it slipped out of my hand and it shattered. And it shattered during a time when I was in a consecration in a broken place. As a rape victim, I was healing and I was attempting to survive. And this slipped out of my hand and it was broken in a million pieces. Like me, it was shattered. And I realized if I put it back together, it has a different shape, but it's a beautiful mosaic. But when I poured the seed in it, it was pouring out of its side. But what I recognize is the birds still fed from the seed that were pouring out of a broken vessel. And that's who we are as women. We have to remember that things will still pour out of us and root into the earth. And yes, it will be a dark place. Everything that pours out of us, every seed has to die. It has to germinate, has to go into the soil, has to go dark. And then it changes form, just like the babies in our womb. And then we will push. It'll be laborious and we'll press and we'll bleed out. Things will shift. Things will move. Things will make way. We will cry. It's uncomfortable, but we will push things into another dimension. We have to recognize that in each other. We have to say it's okay that you're bleeding from broken places, that you have a limp. And then we take each other together on our knees so we can pray ourselves through. And then we can truly be there for each other and for this woman, the earth, this thing that is holding us and feeding us and cleansing us, that purifying us. It's our greatest necessity. And if we destroy it, that's an equal opportunity destroyer. It won't matter whether we're male or female, poor or rich, black or white, Jew or Gentile.
There's like 70,000 nuggets that she just did in the last 10 minutes, but I just have to do a station ID. If you're wondering who this wisdom that is pouring through the broken pieces of the beautiful, that she is more than the broken pieces, it's Piper Dellums here in my studio. If you don't know who she is, you're going to get to know, because I'm going to make that happen. She is one of the most articulate and love-centered, powerful and beautiful at the same time women that I have met. I wish I could say I've known her forever. In some, we probably did, have that. But I just actually met her 10 days ago in Beverly Hilton at the I Am a Superwoman. And yes, we are a superwoman. If you haven't, we're not wallflowers. I know you thought we were, but sarcasm is another service I offer.
And there's more where that came from. Stay tuned to Take My Advice. I'm Not Using It. Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on KCAA, the station that leaves no listener behind.
Take back your life with Dr. Marissa Pay.
And we're back. You're tuned in to Take My Advice. I'm Not Using It. Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on KCAA, NBC News Radio, AM 1050, FM 102.3, FM 106.5, and streaming everywhere. iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, iTunes, and more. And yes, this is the #1 station in the IE for talk news. And thanks to you, this is the #1 show on 8 a.m. in the same area. And I'm so glad you're here, coming back to hear more motivation and hope from my friend Piper Dellums. Enjoy.
And Piper Dellums is actually here, although I'm really glad that you dropped a couple of bombs in there from your past pain, and we're going to talk about that. But I did want you to introduce us to somebody super duper important to you, and who I had, it's funny, I had not heard of his name. And so doing the research and then talking to Akili Beckwith and saying, when I told him he's like, wow, you're lucky. And, he is solid, and do your research. And so doing that and having between the photos, I'd like us, Ryan's going to flip through some pictures to honor and tribute your father, Ron Dellums.
And what we have to recognize from my father is, he died as he lived, selflessly. And it makes sense that you wouldn't know his name, because the important thing to my father is that you knew his work. You have to remember that this was a young man from the ghettos of West Oakland who fought his way through Marine Corps, Vietnam, UC Berkeley, Berkeley City Council, Congress, to chair the House Armed Services Committee, to free Nelson Mandela. When he wrote the Comprehensive Sanctions Act in 1970 to end apartheid, the world had no idea what apartheid was. My father was walking hand in hand with Cesar Chavez because he was picking cotton as a child and picking fruit with labor workers, 6, 8, 10, 12 years old. He was with Ron Kovic, who the movie Born on the 4th of July was about. They were both vice presidential nominees in the 1976 Democratic election. If you remember the film Born on the 4th of July that Tom Cruise starred in, when his character was rolled up on that stage, that was my father live speaking who introduced him to that stage.
Wow.
It was Ron Kovic that hand sewed a flag for my father that had a peace sign in place of stars that hung outside of his congressional office for 13 terms. For a man who was a peacemonger, who stopped the MX missile, who stopped the B-2 bomber, who brought women to freedom, gay rights, human rights, oppressed rights. He was also the man, the far left liberal that they chose because of his fairness to chair the House Armed Services Committee. This is the first African-American man to serve in Congress in the state of California, the first African-American and the first liberal Democrat to chair the House Armed Services Committee, to be the 4th man under the president. When he brought Mandela home after Ronald Reagan vetoed his bill, 15 years passed before the world lifted up their voice, before they understood what a mandala meant. But we were having dialogues as a family with Nelson, with Desmond Tutu. It was a family mission. As theirs, you see my dad is at a table there with Cesar Chavez. They fought that good fight together, hand in hand. He was a warrior for the people. He was a warrior for women, for nations, for humanity, for the broken, for the oppressed, for the underserved, for the voiceless, for, he gave sight to the blind. He was humanity and divinity wrapped in one, and he was crucified by the Klan, crucified by racism, crucified by conservatives.
There's a picture of him being led away in
handcuffs. Yes, he was arrested at the South African embassy, trying to put an end to apartheid. He was also arrested for his policies for freedom of Haiti. He was an extraordinary human being. And he was a long-distance runner in real life. He alleviated his stress with this extraordinarily organic, healthy diet, but also a 10-mile run every day. But just like his natural run, this was the race with patience. It was a run for peace. What he said at the beginning is that peace is an idealism. That's he and his mother. Peace, I have to tell you a story about that. Peace is idealistic, but when he died, before he died, he said it's imperative for this nation to come to peace, because now it's an imperative. We have to find peace amongst nations, amongst people, amongst humanity, neighborhoods, and families because of the environmental condition where we are now.
I'm sure you talked a lot about the current president and what was happening. What was his
What was his take? I mean, my father is an extraordinary man in that although he had his issues, bipartisan issues, he was so progressive, so liberal. He was never one to condemn or judge or put down. He was a listener. What he said is that there's always a nugget of something worthy coming forth from another. That he had a recognition that there is light and darkness always, and there will always be light to permeate the darkness. We had the Twin Towers fall down, and there was a dialogue of hatred that was permeating the nation. But if you remember, in the billows of smoke and in the fiery furnace, people in the dark that were rescuing each other from within, they weren't leaning their hands down saying, are you gay, are you straight, are you Muslim, are you Jew? That was humanity fighting to save humanity. And all of the tsunamis of life, like I said earlier, it leads us to our knees. So I look at this administration, and I'm sure that he did as well, is there has to sometimes be something that guides us back into the fight. We have to see the men hanging from the trees in the South. We have to see women suffering, having back alley abortions, being beaten and trafficked and sold and bought to bring us back to the fight. We have to hear the voices of the indigenous saying, you will not poison our land, to bring us back to the fight. We've become complacent. So sometimes it takes a Donald Trump. Sometimes it takes, a Betsy DeVos to remind us to get away from our computers, our laptops, our cell phones, our Facebook pages, to reunite as a body of humanity. Sometimes it takes us to get hungry and thirsty so that we can go back out there and feed. A grassroots effort. It took Vietnam for us to fight against it. It took World War II for us to fight against it. Oftentimes it takes us to be led by leaders who are bringing darkness and clouds, who are veiling human dignity and human peace and human connection, so that we come together to rise up, and that we remember and recognize that we are a body of unification and humanity. It takes darkness for us to understand the light. It takes hunger for us to understand what it means to feed. It takes sickness for us to rejoice in our health and well-being. So I believe that he probably looks at this administration and says, if that's what it takes to wake us up, then that's what it takes to wake us up. But we're not going back to a place of slumber. We are rising. We're passing the baton to these young people who have become complacent. And this is what it's going to take. So here we are roaring.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. I know people are like, see, this is what you do when you go on other people's show. I'm now recognizing it. I love it. I love it. I'm not even, because if I talk, people are going to be mad. Like, why didn't you let her talk? So I do want the story of how your dad got involved in the whole Mandela and how your families, because Piper actually spoke at Mandela's 95th birthday celebration. She was invited. So that tells me, okay, well, she's a great speaker, but I mean, I want to know the story behind that.
I'll be quite honest. That is probably not a story that I would be able to tell you, because my father opening up his eyes and heart to Africa as a nation started when I was 4 years old.
Okay. Yeah, but you were part of that.
I was part of that.
Yes.
And I can tell you the personal aspect of my being part of it. As a young person, I did have a recognition and an understanding of what being separated and apart meant in that nation. I knew there was no running water, no sewerage. I knew that people's rights were being stripped. I knew that that was a new enforcement of slavery. I knew that there were pass books that said you can be on the street or you can't be on the street because of your color. I knew that women were being raped and tortured. Their babies were being stripped from their bosom upon birth and sent out to gold mines and diamond mines. I knew because I heard my father and my mother crying, shedding tears, baptizing our bodies in tears as they put us to bed, to tell us to recognize what is going on in other nations. Because again, if you sneeze in the Middle East, you catch a cold in the United States. They wanted us to know that when a child is dying or suffering there, it's no different than a child dying and suffering in our own home. So they opened up, and I had an understanding. I did understand that Nelson Mandela had been imprisoned. I understood about the Soweto uprising and the death of Stephen Biko. And I remember understanding to my cognitive ability, but I remember enough that I wanted to get a child out out from there. And I begged my father when I was a little girl, please, can I have an exchange student? Please, can we have someone come and live with us? Because we had a beautiful life. We had 14 rooms in our 3-story home. A beautiful life. My mother was an attorney. My father was a United States congressman. They were fighters and warriors, and we had space. We had freedom. Can you bring a South African daddy, a young South African girl? Can she live with us for a year? And that's what the Disney film, The Color of Friendship, is about, which won a number of Emmys. That's what my story, Simunye, which in Zulu means we are one, was about. And that's in a compilation that I wrote called Open Your Eyes.
And then they made a movie
That's
out
right.
of that.
And my father did say yes at that time. He said, yes, you can have a South African student come and live with you. And it was like, awesome. I also get a sister. I get someone to play with.
Yeah.
And when the young girl showed up to our front door, we were prepared. I was prepared, with my hippie babysitter from next door. We had incense burning and Congo music going. And it's not the Congo. We had a big banner in the background that said something in another language that was not a language in South Africa that said welcome. And we had African art out. I had my hair in braids. I had a dashiki. And knocking on the door comes a white Afrikaner from a very affluent family who immediately said, go and fetch my things from the boot and tell the congressman and his family I've arrived, shoved us out of the way. And we realized, oh my gosh, there was no internet then. There were no cell phones. They thought we were a white family because he was in Congress. We thought she was a Zulu, Xhosa, Sotho, or Northern Sotho. But we got an Afrikaner in our home.
So let's go back to another little point of pain. So you were raped. That was one of the things that when you were shattered. And what I love is, and this is what we have in common, we see breakage, we see trauma, we see bad things as alchemizers. And I think that is, if I'm not known for anything else when I transition, I want people, that's what my book, 8 Ways to Happiness from Wherever You Are, is all about, is that past pain does not define you, it alchemizes you. It's not what happened to you, it's what happened for you. There's another thing that happened that you dropped a bomb on me right before we went on the air, and I wanted to just get to know that a little better.
Sure.
Your children.
My children, well, when we left South Africa, and I won't personalize it so much because they are doing extraordinary things in their lives right now. My eldest daughter just took the bar exam, just finished law school, California bar. Congratulations, beautiful one. And my youngest daughter is finishing up her master's in fashion, and she will continue to flourish in psychology, in arts and fashion and psychology. However, when I returned from South Africa, I had to deal with the very real reminder that myself, even as a child, when my parents were away and fighting to save nations, we were oftentimes left with babysitters. And I suffered child sexual abuse every single day in a basement, probably from the age of 6 to 8, at the hands of someone that we all trusted. I didn't have the voice to explain what was happening. I didn't have the voice to get myself out of it, and I don't even think that I understood. All I knew is that it was a woe and a pain that pushed me to a place of perfection, which is not a helpful or healthy place. Mm-hmm. What happens is those things that take you out of control in your life, you have to find something else to control. Mm-hmm. So in that, going to UC Berkeley and NYU and trying to be the perfect student and the perfect wife and the perfect mother, I did not recognize when I took my children to a pediatrician one day and one of my daughters ended up with a venereal disease at the age of 5, that my children too were being sexually abused. That was a long and a terrifying year. And after that year was up and the person who was being accused when all of the charges were dropped because of their wealth, because of the children being too young to testify, on a beautiful St. Patrick's Day, I baked 64 green cupcakes and I walked my babies at the ages of 3 and 5 to their preschool up in the Berkeley Hills in Kensington. I dropped them off at school. I went back to pick them up and I didn't see them again for 8 years. It was not an easy 8 years. I was not that warrior of strength that you hear now. It most certainly took away my breath. It took away my desire to live. It took away my sobriety. It took away my sanity. 3 suicide attempts later, I went down to 95 pounds, shaved my head, lost my mind, left a $5 million home, disappeared from my family, and moved into a hooker motel where I slept on a shower floor for 3 years, attempting to drink myself to death. On the one day that I thought I was finally successful, I poured out a lot of food for my dog. I poured water into a bowl. I lit a couple of candles. I wrote a suicide note. And I passed out. I hit my head on an end table, and right before the blood reached my tongue, I saw that I had fallen on the bed and yanked down a blanket. That blanket had set fire to the candles, and I didn't have the strength to put them out. And I saw the room and the bed on fire as I went unconscious. I woke up 3 days later. 3 days later. My dog had knocked over the water bowls, the fire had gone out, and I realized, like Jesus, I'd resurrected from hell after 3 days. But still, covered in blood and urine and vomit, I stumbled my way down to a liquor store. I was 29, 30 years old, I think at the time, still with the desire to take my own life because I didn't know how to live or breathe without my children. Yes. I was still nursing my youngest. And when I got to that corner, there was a hand on my shoulder. I heard someone say my name for the first time in years. Piper, is that you? It was one of the mothers from the school, one of the children, one of her children that used to swim in my indoor pool in the beautiful home and the life that I'd created before they were taken. And she said, oh my God, you didn't find your children, did you? The power of one. That woman followed me in her very fancy car from the very fancy neighborhood that I once lived in, back to that filthy hellhole, that sepulcher, that grave that had become my final resting place. She knocked on the door. She came every single day. She brought women from her church. She fed me, bathed me, but pulled me off the floor when I was unconscious, lay me in a tub, cleaned me up, pray over me, play music, force food down my throat. And then one day I said to her, I don't want you to come back here. Death is my destiny. I do not want to live without my children. I can't fight this. I can't survive this. She said, if you come to church with me just one day, I'll never bother you again. She brought me a clean dress to wear. I washed myself up. I still reeked of alcohol pouring through my pores. I went into that church feeling like I was too filthy for God to love me or forgive me, to see me or hear me. I sat in the back and I shook, and all of these women surrounded me. They started praying over me. She had spoken to people about me, and the next thing I knew, my hands were in the air. I was crying like a tsunami, rain pouring down my face, and everything in my soul came to a climax. I was speaking in a language I didn't understand. They said, you're now speaking in tongues. You've been baptized with the Holy Spirit. I didn't know what that meant. Right. And after that, I had a hunger and thirst for God. I walked 14 miles a day in the rain through the worst ghetto I had ever been in, where I was pulling bags of dogs that were being fought on the streets, pulling them from my doorstep, cleaning up crack vials, heroin needles, things that I didn't recognize because I grew up in a palace and I married in a palace, but I was now in a wilderness. It was like Moses, and I was somewhere between Pharaoh's army, my pain, and the Red Sea, where my destiny was. And I didn't realize that woman, that one woman, was my one step away from a miracle, from those seas parting. Wow. So I walked to that church every day. And after 6 months walking back and forth, someone in that church turned around one day with a bag in their hand and said, Sister Piper, I have a gift for you. She handed me the pink slips to a BMW. 4 months later, the church bought me a beautiful house. It was a year after that I found my children. I had a full-time job. I was back in my right mind, and my children had been moved 15 different times, and I found my children, and I was then on the road to my destiny and my purpose. But it wasn't an easy fight. My children did not come back whole. They came back broken, but it was God, it was intention, it was love, it was family, it was prayer that rose them up from cutting razor blades to the body, and all of the different things that occur when the human pain is too much for human existence, failing out of school, drugs. But at the age of 15, my daughter got into a Harvard program. She went from failing to success. She went from that Harvard program to Brandeis, from Brandeis to law school, living in Barcelona for the year, speaking in Spanish, learning other languages. They rose. They became straight-A students, powerful women, powerful human beings. So we walked through those fires together as women. And that's what gave me a voice. And then I recognized that I had a purpose. And that's when I started my talent agency in Los Angeles, and I was writing. Things were going beautifully. I moved to Beverly Hills, and I ended up with a stalker years later. I had already risen to a beautiful place. I didn't realize that God had another fire season for me. I was raped in my home there in Beverly Hills because I left my door open, just coming back from a sweet little jaunt with my dog. And that's what took me from LA. I left everything and I moved to Idlewild, 7,000 feet on top of a mountain, lived alone in a cabin for 5 years, chopping firewood, raising chickens, waiting tables. No one knew who I was or where I came from. And that's when I got my call from God as to what I was supposed to do, that it wasn't running a talent agency. It was to be a voice for the people. It was to rescue women from human trafficking, from domestic violence, from trauma and abuse. It was to be the voice of nations. I didn't know how that was going to happen. And just like everything, there was a season before that was a fertile fruit. I believe that my father's dying. Something has to die for something to live, because my father was my rock. He was my confidant. He was my best friend. He was my rescuer. He was my everything. It was my father that came into a mental hospital when I was on the floor, unable to speak, skin and bones, and took that flag that Ron Kovic gave him and wrapped it around my body and said to me, in my brokenness, we're going to find our daughters, our babies, and when we do, where do we tell them you went? It was my father that planted that seed, but I still relied on him to be the wind beneath my wings. When I came back down that mountain, it was because I fell in love. It was because I had to speak at Mandela's event. It was because I was being called to a purpose, but my knees were still knocking with fear and doubt and lack. And when my father passed from glory into glory, that was the moment that I realized. He said to me, he laid his hand on my forehead and he said, "It is your time. I'm passing you my mantle, my anointing. Take my legacy, baby girl, and run. Do not stop. There is work to be done." So it is only right now that you're hearing my voice, because it is only right now that I realize that I have to carry his legacy over, because he asked it of me, because he prayed it over me, because that was what his gift, the pearl that he left in my hand. So now I'm picking up that mantle. That is why I'm here doing your show. That is what I know that I have to do. That I was not left to die without my children. I was not left to die on the street. I was not left to die in addiction. I was not left to die from suicide or in a mental institution, or to be somebody's victim for rape and sodomy. I was not left to be alone on a mountaintop. I was not left to be alone. I was brought here for a purpose, and my purpose starts now.
And for that, we are very grateful. And thank you for sharing your heart and your life. And it's if you've been through any kind of pain in life, please see what pain can do. Not the broken part, but the broken into so many pieces that can be enjoyed and seen and provide hope and inspiration to around the world. And I am honored, and I can't even say, this is like the first time where, when people go through pain, you want to say, "I'm so sorry." I mean, I'm sad for the pain that must have been overwhelming when it happened, but look what happened. I mean, it really, the alchemy is so important. I mean, I don't know a more powerful woman on the planet right now. And honestly, I think that all of that pain was necessary, because I used to have people, when I talk about my abuse, and they would say, "But don't you wish that you hadn't have been abused? Don't you think you could be who you are now without all of that pain?" And I can adamantly say to you, no, I could not have been. As you could not be who you are without all of that incredible purification.
Because something has to die in order for something to live.
You thought I like to talk and be #relentlessly inspiring? I think I'm passing that label on to my friend Piper Dellums. I hope you enjoyed that. You can get the whole interview from my YouTube channel, free subscribe. It will also alert you to every new show weekday mornings at 8. So glad you were here. This is Dr. Marissa reporting live from her living room, reminding you that it's all about balance. Peace in, peace out, world peace through inner peace. Go forth and multiply the goodness that you are, and have the best day ever.